What's up, guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 1987 Chevy Corvette base. Up front is a 5.7-liter V8, and down below is a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this C4 base Corvette because I've driven the ZR1 of this generation, and of course I loved it, but I always think it is important to include the base models as well to really get a full idea of what a car offered in its era. So, in 1987, sure, there were better options, but a lot of people got the base model. So, we're going to dive into this vehicle here today and figure out what it was actually like to own a Corvette back in 1987. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website, zachpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form, takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. But let's get back to that 5.7-liter V8 under the hood. Well, every single Corvette in the C4 era got a 5.7-liter. However, they switched from this small block Chevy to the LT1 later on. They just kept the same displacement. So this is the earlier engine. This is fuel injected, and it makes like 240-ish horsepower, maybe? I don't know. This era of V8s was not very powerful, and there's always those memes and jokes that go around online saying, oh, how did General Motors manage to squeeze so little horsepower out of such a big engine? Well, the truth is emissions. In the 80s, cars had to pass emissions, a holdover from the mid-70s with the oil crisis. And so they had a lot of restraints on the engines themselves. And so the fact that this even still retained a V8 when the Mustang was switching to the 4-cylinder and thinking about sticking to only the 4-cylinder, that's something noteworthy. And that's going to be a big talking point towards the end of the video. Like I said, paired to it, 4-speed automatic. I don't love that it's an automatic. However, I think it's actually doing the job fine. It did get a lower ratio rear end, so it's not as fast as the manual. However, the throttle is relatively still punchy, and I like that. Last but not least, the Corvette, of course, is rear-wheel drive. However, this also doesn't have the torque tube. This actually has a traditional transmission without the transaxle at the back that later came with the C5, C6, and C7. How does it feel to drive an automatic base model Corvette from 1987? It's nice. It is a cruiser, and the overall chassis of the C4 is a lot better than it was in the C3. This is really when the Corvette truly became a sports car, and you notice that in the dynamics. It can actually turn a little bit. It doesn't feel like a dated piece of metal. It actually feels relatively responsive. That's what I've always liked about the C4. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, ladies and gentlemen, the best sight in the world, digital gauges. And I can actually see these digital gauges here today. In the sunlight, in direct sunlight, I can't see dookie. But in the shade, you can actually really, truly appreciate these digital gauges. And of course, at night, I mean, look at how special and awesome and beautiful these digital gauges are. I absolutely love them. We don't get anything on the steering wheel besides the Corvette logo. And off to the left, we have our fog light switch, and a climate vent. Moving on to the door, we have our wiper settings on the door. Very odd placement here, as well as the latch to get in and out, but that's it. No window switches. We just get wiper switches. Moving into the center, we have 4 symmetrical climate vents, and we have a bunch of buttons for our information. So we can switch around from like oil pressure and oil temperature, range and trip odometer, instant fuel rate and average, coolant temperature and voltage, and we can of course turn all of that off as well. So really, really cool that they give you these options. To the right, it looks like a blank panel. However, this is the warning lights. So luckily, none of them are illuminated for me to show you. But if I did have one, that's where it would be. And down below, we have an aftermarket radio because anything from the 80s isn't going to keep up with modern tech. And we have our climate controls down below. A little digital readout for that. Cool and warm AC, manual defrost, econ, all of those goodies found right there. Then we have a cigarette lighter and cup holders. So we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the 1987 Chevy Corvette. And although it doesn't pass, I'm excited and happy to see that it has cup holders at all. Quick timeout from the interior to appreciate this awesome Fleetwood limo and a pretty graffitied out wagon of sorts. Looks like maybe a Mercury Colony Park, I can't tell. Very cool Americana, but let's get back to the Corvette. Off to the left is the automatic shifter. We've seen this in so many vehicles from the era. And then down below we have the 2 window switches and a little cubby with the mirror adjustments in it. We also do get a center console, and we'll talk about the seats. The seats are finished in a nice tan perforated leather, and I really like the look of them, and I actually fit in them really well. I don't always fit in sporty seats, but I'm able to here in this C4, and I like that a lot. Now, we don't have any back seats, but we do have a trunk, so we'll hop out and take a look back there. All right, so we're on the back of the Corvette C4, and you can pull it up like that. I popped it from inside. It's actually in the center console, and of course, that is my filming equipment. So as you can see, not the craziest space in the world. We will talk about those clips in a second. That's where you put the roof, but overall, that is the trunk space of the C4 Corvette. And I do want to note one thing back here, always kind of funny to me, is that this is actually the fuel filler cap is right here in the center. Unleaded fuel only, because that was still a thing to have leaded fuel back in the 80s. So very cool to see that around the back of the C4. And you just bring it down like this. Nope. And then you just bring it down like this, and it's closed. First try. Don't question that. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I've always had a soft spot for the C4 Corvette. I've always thought that they looked good, and I have to say, these wheels are known as salad shooters, and I think that they are absolutely amazing. They're some of my favorite factory wheels ever fitted to a car, so I'm happy to see them here in the C4 Corvette. I've really enjoyed them. Also love the red color, and this does have a glass Targa top, which is really nice. That can be removed and stored in the trunk with these little clips. It actually slides into these little clips in the trunk. Very cool, and we saw this all the way up through the C6. But with all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving a base model C4 Corvette? Well, I think people see the automatic, they hear base model, and they probably turned off this video pretty quickly, if they even clicked on it at all. And I honestly can't blame them. It's not the most exciting car in the world, but I think this car does play an important role in Corvette's history, and I don't think it's a bad vehicle. I think it just has boring attributes associated with it. Here's why this car is so important. Back in the 1970s, we had an oil crisis. We actually had 2 oil crises that made the government crack down on safety and emission standards. Mostly the emission standards plays into this vehicle. Basically, the engines had to run really clean, and this was a shock to manufacturers at the time. They had never designed engines that had to run clean. They just focused on power, and that was it. So throughout the late 70s and early 80s, we saw the death of big displacement vehicles. You used to be able to get cars with 7.5 liter or 8 liter V8s. I mean, monster engines. But that all went away because of emission standards, and we started focusing on smaller displacement V8s, or even V6s, or like I said in the Ford Mustang scenario, we actually got a 4-cylinder turbo. My point being, ever since after the first generation Corvette, so after the C1, Chevy never offered a 6-cylinder or less Corvette ever again. The very first generation, you could get a 6-cylinder Corvette. But ever since then, it's been 8. And I think people often are quick to judge the Corvette for having low horsepower in the 80s. And they forget that it even had a V8 at all. They stuck true to the Corvette's essence and kept the V8. This is the boy who lived. This is the car that made it through the oil crisis and saw it to the other side. Because there were plenty of vehicles that existed in the oil crisis, but not many of them actually continued on afterwards nearly unchanged. And let alone a V8 sports car to be the one to do that is absolutely crazy. The oil crisis, in my opinion, or the malaise era, really ended around 1983 in my book. That's when car makers started to kind of pick up where they left off and started producing halfway decent cars again. And this generation started in 1983 for 1984. This is what post-oil crisis Corvettes looked like and were. And I have to say, with that frame of reference, with that in mind, these aren't half bad. Are they as blood pumping as a Z06, C5, or C6? No. But again, this car has survivor bias. Everyone judges it because of the low horsepower V8 that it had. But they forget to judge it on the fact that it even had a V8 during the most strict engine era we've ever seen in America. And so for that reason, I love the C4 Corvette. And it's a monument to America and Chevy's ingenuity and commitment to the V8, and to see it through to the other side of the crisis where many of its fellow vehicles ended up dying. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Ron for letting me take out his C4 Corvette. This was such a cool history lesson. I really, really enjoyed it. Ron has been absolutely awesome to work with. We also filmed his McCore earlier today. Lovely, lovely vehicle there as well, which you already saw on the channel. But Ron is great, and I appreciate him very, very much. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.